What if I told you that most of your relationships have been built on a lie? Not the kind of lie where someone cheats or hides their past, but a deeper, more insidious deception that happens at the level of the psyche itself. A lie so fundamental that it determines who you fall in love with, how you show up in relationships, and why so many of them end in devastating disappointment. Carl Jung, the legendary Swiss psychiatrist, spent decades unraveling this mystery. What he discovered was so profound and so uncomfortable that most people spend their entire lives running from it. But for those brave enough to face the truth, it offers a path to authentic love and unshakable personal power. Today, we're diving deep into Jung's most controversial insights about love, projection, and the psychological forces that secretly control your romantic life. Fair warning, this isn't feel-good relationship advice. This is psychological surgery, and it's going to hurt before it heals. Welcome to the Wisdom for Men channel, where we explore the hidden psychology behind male behavior. I'm your host, and today we're embarking on what might be the most important journey you'll ever take, the journey from psychological possession to authentic selfhood. If you've ever wondered why your relationships feel like battlefields, why you keep attracting the same types of people, or why love seems to slip through your fingers just when you think you found it, this video will change everything. But more than that, it might just save your soul from a lifetime of unconscious living. Let's begin with a question that will frame everything we discuss today. Are you in love with a person, or are you in love with your own projection? Picture this scenario. Sarah meets David at a coffee shop. He's reading a philosophy book, has kind eyes, and when he speaks, there's something magnetic about his quiet confidence. Within minutes, Sarah's mind is racing. She imagines deep conversations about life's mysteries, romantic walks discussing poetry, a man who truly understands her soul. By the end of their first date, she's already planning their future together. But here's what Sarah doesn't realize. She's not falling in love with David. She's falling in love with her animus. Jung discovered that every woman carries within her psyche an unconscious masculine element he called the animus. This isn't just some abstract concept. It's a living, breathing psychological force that shapes how women perceive and relate to men. The animus represents everything a woman believes masculinity should be: strength, wisdom, protection, adventure, depth. When the animus is undeveloped, when a woman hasn't done the psychological work to understand and integrate this inner masculine, something dangerous happens. She begins projecting this idealized masculine onto the men in her life. She sees not who they actually are, but who she needs them to be to feel complete. This is why so many relationships start with intense passion and end in bitter disappointment. The woman isn't disappointed because the man changed. She's disappointed because she finally sees him clearly, stripped of her projections. The philosophical giant she imagined turns out to be a guy who likes to read but would rather watch Netflix. The strong protector reveals himself to be someone struggling with his own insecurities. The deep, mysterious soul is actually pretty straightforward and sometimes just wants to be left alone. But here's where it gets really twisted. The man often knows, on some level, that he's performing a role. He senses that he's being seen as something grander than he is, and initially, it feels amazing. Who doesn't want to be someone's hero, philosopher, or savior? So he leans into the projection. He starts trying to become what she sees in him, even if it means betraying his authentic self. This creates what Jung called a participation mystique, a psychological fusion where neither person knows where they end and the other begins. The woman lives in a fantasy of who the man could be, and the man lives in the exhausting performance of trying to be that fantasy. The tragedy is that both people think this is love. The woman believes she's found her soulmate, the man who completes her. The man believes he's found someone who truly sees his potential, who believes in him in a way he's never experienced before. But neither is seeing clearly. They're both trapped in a hall of mirrors, in love with reflections rather than reality. And when the projection inevitably collapses, when reality can no longer sustain the fantasy, both people feel betrayed. She feels deceived, as if he deliberately misled her. He feels rejected, as if his authentic self isn't good enough. Neither understands that they were never really in relationship with each other at all. This is the power and danger of projection. It promises transcendence, but delivers devastation. It offers the illusion of perfect love while preventing actual intimacy. Because you cannot truly love someone you cannot truly see, and projection is the enemy of clear sight. Now, let's flip the script and examine what this does to men. Because while women are projecting their animus, men are often desperate to be the recipients of that projection. And this reveals something deeply troubling about masculine psychology in our culture. Most men, Jung observed, derive their sense of self-worth not from their own accomplishments, values, or inner development, but from being chosen by women. Think about it. From the time boys hit puberty, their entire social reality revolves around female approval. Are they attractive to girls? Can they get a girlfriend? Are they worthy of feminine attention? This wouldn't be problematic if it were balanced with a strong sense of individual identity. But for most men, it becomes the primary source of their self-esteem. They judge their worth by whether women find them desirable, interesting, or valuable. Their identity becomes contingent on external validation rather than internal development. So when a woman projects her animus onto a man, when she sees him as the embodiment of everything masculine and wonderful, it hits him like a drug. Finally, someone sees his value. Finally, someone recognizes his potential. Finally, he matters. But here's the devastating catch. He's not being valued for who he actually is. He's being valued for how well he fits into her psychological projection. He becomes addicted to a love that was never really meant for him. This creates what Jung called psychic possession. The man becomes possessed by the woman's animus projection. He starts making life decisions based not on his own values, dreams, or authentic desires, but on maintaining her idealized image of him. He might choose careers that impress her rather than fulfill him. He might develop interests that align with her projections rather than his genuine curiosities. He might even adopt personality traits that feel foreign to his natural temperament. I've seen men completely lose themselves in this dynamic. The ambitious entrepreneur who gives up his business because his partner needs him to be more stable and secure. The artist who abandons his craft because she needs him to be more practical and responsible. The introvert who exhausts himself trying to be the social butterfly she imagined him to be. The most insidious part is that the man often doesn't even realize it's happening. He thinks he's growing, evolving, becoming a better version of himself. He doesn't understand that he's actually betraying his authentic nature to maintain a psychological illusion. And when the projection inevitably breaks down, when she finally sees him clearly and realizes he's not the fantasy she created, he's left devastated and confused. He gave up pieces of himself to be what she wanted, and now, even that isn't enough. He doesn't know who he is anymore because he's been living as someone else's projection for so long. This is the male crisis of identity that Jung identified over a century ago, and it's only gotten worse in our current culture. Men are taught to be chameleons, to adapt, to please, to become whatever women want them to be. But in doing so, they lose touch with their own essence, their own path, their own calling. The solution isn't to reject women or become bitter toward feminine psychology. The solution is individuation, the process of becoming a psychologically whole individual who doesn't need external validation to know his own worth. Individuation is Jung's term for the most important journey a human being can undertake, the journey toward becoming a complete, conscious, authentic individual. It's not self-improvement in the popular sense. It's not about becoming more successful, more attractive, or more likable. It's about becoming more real. For men caught in the cycle of projection and validation seeking, individuation is both terrifying and liberating. It requires facing some of the most uncomfortable truths about yourself and society. But it's the only path to genuine freedom and authentic relationship. The journey begins with radical honesty. You must examine your life and ask the hard questions. What am I doing because I want to do it? And what am I doing to gain approval? What aspects of my personality are authentic? And what aspects are performed for others? What dreams have I abandoned because they didn't fit someone else's vision of who I should be? This process requires what Jung called going into the desert, a period of solitude where you step back from the opinions, expectations, and projections of others. You need space to hear your own voice again, to reconnect with your own values, to remember who you were before you started trying to be who others wanted you to be. This isn't easy in our hyper-connected world. We're constantly bombarded with messages about who we should be, how we should look, what we should achieve. Social media makes it almost impossible to exist without reference to others' approval. Dating apps reduce us to commodities competing for validation. Every aspect of modern life seems designed to prevent individuation, but Jung believed that individuation was not just possible, but necessary for psychological health. And for men specifically, it means confronting some painful truths about masculine conditioning. You'll have to face your need for female approval and learn to validate yourself. You'll have to examine the ways you've betrayed your authentic nature to fit into relationships. You'll have to confront the fear that if you show up as you really are, with all your flaws, limitations, and authentic desires, you'll be rejected or abandoned. This fear is what keeps most men trapped in inauthentic relationships. They'd rather be loved for who they're pretending to be than risk being rejected for who they actually are. But Jung understood that this isn't really love at all. It's mutual deception. The individuation process also requires what he called shadow work, confronting the parts of yourself you've denied, suppressed, or projected onto others. For many men, this means acknowledging their selfishness, their anger, their vulnerability, their need for solitude, their unconventional desires, all the aspects of themselves they've hidden to maintain their good guy image. This is where the real work happens. It's not enough to simply identify your authentic self. You have to have the courage to live as that authentic self, even when it disappoints others, even when it costs you relationships. even when it challenges people's projections of who you should be. The irony is that this process, while initially isolating, ultimately makes you more attractive to the right people. When you stop seeking validation and start living authentically, you develop what Jung called psychological magnetism. You become whole unto yourself, and wholeness is inherently attractive to other whole people. But, and this is crucial, you have to be willing to let go of relationships that were based on projection and performance. You have to be willing to be alone rather than be false. You have to choose authenticity over approval, even when approval feels safer. Now, this isn't just a male problem. Women have their own individuation work to do, and it's equally challenging. While men must learn to stop seeking validation through female approval, women must learn to stop seeking wholeness through male projection. The animus, that inner masculine that women project onto men, represents everything a woman feels she lacks or cannot express directly. In traditional gender roles, women were often discouraged from being aggressive, ambitious, intellectually dominant, or emotionally detached. So these qualities got pushed into the unconscious and emerged as the animus. When the animus is undeveloped, women become what Jung called animus possessed. They either project these masculine qualities onto men and then become angry when men fail to embody them perfectly, or they become overly masculine themselves in a way that feels forced and inauthentic. You see this in women who constantly criticize their partners for not being ambitious enough, strong enough, or decisive enough, while never developing these qualities in themselves. Or in women who've swung to the opposite extreme, becoming hyper-independent and dismissive of men entirely, but still secretly hoping to find a man who can match their artificial masculine persona. The healthy integration of the animus means a woman develops her own inner masculine qualities, her own ambition, her own intellectual authority, her own capacity for decisive action, without needing to find these qualities in a man or compete with men to prove she has them. This is incredibly threatening to traditional relationship dynamics. A woman who has integrated her animus doesn't need a man to feel complete. She doesn't need him to be her protector, her provider, her decision maker, or her source of strength. She can appreciate these qualities in a man without being dependent on them. This terrifies many men because it means they can't rely on being needed to feel valuable in the relationship. And it terrifies many women because it means taking full responsibility for their own psychological development rather than expecting a man to complete them. But this is the only foundation for authentic relationship. Two people who are complete in themselves, choosing to share their completeness with each other. Jung called this the marriage of true minds, a union between two individuated people who see each other clearly, without projection or possession. The tragedy is that most people would rather cling to their projections than do this work. It's easier to keep searching for the right person who will finally embody your animus perfectly than to develop those qualities in yourself. It's easier to keep trying to be someone's projection than to risk showing up authentically and being rejected. But for those brave enough to undertake this journey, the reward is immense. When a woman has integrated her animus, she becomes magnetically attractive to individuated men, not because she needs them, but because she can appreciate them without trying to change them. When she stops projecting her inner masculine onto men, she can finally see men as they actually are: complex, flawed, beautiful human beings, rather than symbols of what she lacks. This creates space for real intimacy, Instead of two people trying to complete each other, you have two people celebrating each other. Instead of projection and performance, you have recognition and appreciation. Instead of need-based love, you have choice-based love. But here's what no one tells you about individuation. It comes with a price. When you stop living according to others' projections and start living authentically, you become what Jung called untouchable, not in an arrogant sense, but in the sense that you can no longer be manipulated by guilt, shame, or the withdrawal of approval. This makes you incredibly attractive to some people and absolutely terrifying to others. Those who are still trapped in projection and performance will find your authenticity either magnetic or threatening, often both. You'll discover that many of your relationships were based on mutual psychological need rather than genuine appreciation. People who were drawn to you because you validated their self-image will drift away when you stop playing that role. Friends who enjoyed your people-pleasing tendencies will become uncomfortable with your newfound boundaries. Romantic partners who loved your potential more than your reality will feel disappointed or even betrayed. This is the loneliness of individuation. You realize that most people are more comfortable with masks than faces, more attracted to projections than reality, more invested in their fantasies than in genuine human connection. But for those who persist through this lonely period, something remarkable happens. You start attracting other individuated people, those rare souls who have also done the work of becoming authentically themselves. These relationships are qualitatively different from anything you experienced before. Instead of trying to complete each other, you celebrate each other's completeness. Instead of needing each other, you choose each other. Instead of projecting your unlived life onto each other, you support each other's actual journey. This is what Jung meant by psychological maturity, the capacity to love without possession, to appreciate without projection, to commit without losing yourself. The individuated man becomes attractive not because he's trying to be attractive, but because he's become genuine. He stops seeking female approval and starts living according to his own values. He stops trying to be what others want him to be and starts expressing who he actually is. This authenticity is magnetic because it's so rare. But, and this is crucial, he also becomes selective. When you no longer need external validation to feel whole, you can afford to be choosy about who you let into your inner circle. You're no longer willing to betray yourself for approval or compromise your values for acceptance. This selectivity often puzzles people who are used to men being grateful for any female attention. The individuated man might turn down dates with attractive women who aren't aligned with his values. He might end relationships that feel inauthentic, even if the other person is objectively a good catch. He might choose solitude over companionship if companionship requires sacrificing his authenticity. This isn't misogyny or arrogance, it's self-respect. It's the natural result of knowing your own worth, rather than needing others to validate it for you. So here we are at the end of our journey through Jung's most challenging insights about love, projection, and psychological development. If you've made it this far, you're probably feeling a mixture of recognition, discomfort, and maybe even hope. That's exactly how transformation feels. Uncomfortable at first, but ultimately liberating. The message Jung offers isn't comfortable, but it is profoundly liberating. Stop performing. Stop seeking wholeness in others. Stop trying to be what others want you to be, and stop expecting others to be what you want them to be. Choose yourself fully, not in a selfish, narcissistic way, but in a responsible, conscious way. Do the work of becoming a complete human being, one who doesn't need external validation to know their worth, who doesn't need others to complete them, who can love without possessing and commit without losing themselves. This is the path of individuation, and it's the only path to authentic relationship. Everything else is just mutual projection and performance, elaborate games of psychological hide and seek that prevent real intimacy and genuine connection. Jung didn't offer comfort. He offered liberation through responsibility, confrontation, and radical self-awareness. He understood that most people would choose the familiar pain of unconscious living over the temporary discomfort of waking up. But for those brave enough to undertake the journey, he promised something invaluable: the chance to live as who you actually are, rather than who others want you to be. The question isn't whether this path is easy. It's not. The question is whether you're willing to trade the false security of projection and performance for the genuine freedom of authentic living. Your relationships will never be the same once you understand these principles. Some will end because they were based on mutual delusion rather than genuine connection. Others will deepen beyond anything you thought possible because they'll be based on reality rather than fantasy. But regardless of what happens to your relationships, you'll have something far more valuable: yourself, the real you, not the performed version, not the projected version, but the authentic, individuated, complete human being you were meant to be. And from that place of wholeness, you can finally experience what Jung called the marriage of true minds. Love between two people who see each other clearly, appreciate each other fully, and choose each other freely. The journey starts with a single step: the willingness to see yourself and others as you truly are, rather than as you wish you were. Are you ready to take that step? If this video challenged you, changed you, or made you think differently about your relationships, please hit that like button and subscribe for more deep dives into human psychology. Share this with someone who needs to hear it. But be prepared, because once you see these patterns, you can't unsee them. Drop a comment below and let me know. What projections have you been carrying? What masks are you ready to take off? The journey of individuation is lonely, but it's easier when we support each other in telling the truth. Until next time, remember, the goal isn't to be loved by everyone. It's to be authentically yourself, and let that authenticity attract the right people into your life. See you in the next video.